Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be giving you guys my updated 2024 presidential election prediction as of the month of July between former President Donald Trump and incumbent President Joe Biden post debate obviously. But before we get started, make sure you guys are subscribed, click the bell so you don't miss out on my content. Also, we have memberships. If you are interested, you can find the link to that in the description section. Give this video a thumbs up, press the like button. And now back to the topic of today's video. Let's begin with the electoral map and fill out some of these swing and battleground states because we're not going to be focusing on the solid red or blue states obviously. So I do think that the typical likely Trump states are now going to be moving into the solid red column. For the former president, Iowa and Ohio, in my opinion, are now safe after that debate as of July. If the election was held today, Donald Trump would win those states by comfortable margins, over 10 percentage points, cracking double digits. I just think both of those states are pretty much lost causes for the Democratic Party at this point. It's just out of reach for Joe Biden in any type of scenario. But believe it or not, I actually do think that there is one typical solid blue state that will be dropping down to the likely column, so it will narrow up because Biden's just so unpopular, and that happens to be the state of New Jersey. I do think Biden's going to win it probably by around 8 to 9 percentage points this time around. Keep in mind he won it by roughly 16 points just 4 years ago, but due to the fact that he's just so unpopular, and after watching that debate, I just think that state's going to be a whole lot closer. And one thing to keep in mind is that we are considering RFK Jr. or Kennedy. Obviously, he is a factor in this three-way race. And I think he can play a spoiler, and he would probably get the votes of, not happy Democrats that voted for Biden just in 2020, and he would probably get some of those voters that watched that debate who are Democrats and don't like Biden. They might go over and flock over to RFK, which would help him, and also it would help Trump even more. And then the likely states for Joe Biden, in my opinion, are Colorado and New Mexico. I just think both of those states are just out of reach for Donald Trump, especially Colorado. That state's actually getting bluer, believe it or not. Even though it's still considered a swing or battleground state, I just think it's one of the more bluer ones for Joe Biden. And even a state like New Mexico, it's extremely hard for Trump to overcome the votes in Albuquerque. It's a very, white liberal type of, county. I just think that's impossible for Trump to overcome that. At the end of the day, I do expect Trump to make significant gains among Hispanics, especially in the state of Florida, as well as Texas. Specifically, Cuban Americans are shifting towards the right. Miami-Dade County flipped to DeSantis in the 2022 midterms from blue to red, and he won by nearly 20 percentage points. Marco Rubio in the Senate had a very successful victory, cracking double digits. So overall, statewide, Florida has abandoned the Democratic Party, and it's now a very red state, and it's going to be pro-Trump this November. And even a state like Texas, we have a border crisis. And on the issue of immigration alone, Joe Biden is extremely disapproved of. And with that being said, that's probably a losing issue for him. And we have record number, obviously, of illegal border crossings, and people are dying from murders, and we all know that stuff. So I just think Texas would heavily go in favor of Trump by probably around 8 to 9 percentage points this come November. And one thing I forgot to mention in this video, this is going to be based off of my prediction alone. This has nothing to do with what the polls say. So we set polls aside. This is what I believe if polls never existed, just to make that clear. So to be transparent, polls have no factor in this prediction for today's video. And now the lean states for the former president Donald Trump. I do think both Georgia and North Carolina would be lean for the former president, as well as a state like Nevada, Arizona, another border state just like Texas. That issue would be very important, especially it's going to be in favor of Donald Trump. And even the Rust Belt state of Wisconsin, believe it or not, in my opinion. So starting off with Georgia, I think the main reason why Biden flipped the state for the first time in 2020 for any Democrats since like Bill Clinton is because he got a high turnout among African American support. He got like nearly 90% among that group, and he won the state by a margin of like 11,000 votes, which is a margin of 0.3 percentage points. So considering that the margin of error was just so small for Joe Biden in this state, I guarantee you more than likely Trump's going to flip this in 2024. And also North Carolina is, in my opinion, a more of a red state than a state like Arizona or even Georgia is, because when both of those states, Arizona and Georgia, went to Biden in 2020, North Carolina rejected that, and it did the opposite. It stayed red for Donald Trump. He won that by 1.5 percentage points. So I actually think Trump can expand on his margin in the state of North Carolina. It's getting more redder than a lot of people may think. So he'll probably win the state by roughly 3 to 4 percentage points if the election was held in July. And we go back to Georgia. I think if Biden does not hold up to his numbers and the Atlanta metropolitan area, the suburbs here are very important, he is more than likely not going to hang on to this state ultimately at the end of the day. And then states like Nevada, I do think if Trump's able to, flip Reno County at the end of the day ultimately, or, Washoe, then I think he's probably going to win this state. And in my opinion, if George W. Bush is able to win this state back in 2004, Donald Trump definitely can. I think Trump would probably win it by even more of a margin than George W. Bush is, considering that he's probably arguably a weaker candidate than Donald Trump. One thing to take into consideration is that Joe Biden does not improve on Hillary Clinton's margin in 2020 in the state of Nevada. He practically won it by the exact same amount Hillary Clinton did. And you can argue she's much of a worse candidate than Joe Biden did. So this state, that goes to show you that it's really shifting towards the right in favor of Republicans. And Donald Trump doesn't necessarily have to flip, Clark County or the Vegas area. What he can do is ensure that Joe Biden does not hold up to his numbers that he got in 2020 in that county. I mean, it could get very narrow. Trump doesn't have to win it, but if it's very close, then Biden's probably not going to hold on to Nevada in 2024. If Trump is able to make gains among Hispanic voters, that is very key to his victory in the state of Nevada in 2024. I think he's probably going to win the state. Even in Arizona, this is another border state. I think this entire state comes down to Maricopa County. That is basically the most important thing. And Biden won that particular county by a couple percentage points just 4 years ago, and Trump won it in 2016. So I'm going to be honest, Arizona is a very left-trendy state. It is getting bluer as we speak. I mean, they just elected a Democratic governor 2 years ago, Katie Hobbs, and she beat Kari Lake, which you can argue that's a terrible candidate, but still it does not matter. They still have a Democratic senator, and they haven't elected a Democratic governor since like 2009. So that really goes to show you the shifts and the trends in the state of Arizona go in favor of the Democratic Party. But still, we're talking about 2024, not 2028, not the future. This election, Donald Trump's going to win Arizona by probably 3 percentage points, in my opinion, considering that the border is just a mess. And that if that is a very, strong priority issue to a lot of these voters, that issue alone could impact this race heavily in favor of Donald Trump. The last lean state for the former President Donald Trump, before we move on to the lean states for Joe Biden, is the Rust Belt state of Wisconsin, in which I think Trump's margin in 2024 would probably be between 1 to 2 percentage points in this state. I think if Biden does not hold up to his numbers to some of these, stronghold Democratic counties like Milwaukee, he might lose the state. I think it's going to come down to those 20,000 votes that Biden ultimately won the state by in 2020, just 4 years ago. I think if Trump flips 20,000, obviously he's automatically going to win the state, which I think that's not hard to do. I think 20,000 votes, flipping that from blue to red, is very possible for Donald Trump, considering the state of the economy. Inflation is just a mess. And people are probably poorer overall than where they were 4 years ago. Issues like that really matters to these Rust Belt voters. And if Trump is able to run up the numbers in some of these stronghold Republican counties like Green Bay, I think he's probably going to win this state. And now the lean states for Joe Biden, before we move on to the tilt states, is going to be New Hampshire. I think that's now lean for Joe Biden. Actually, I had it lean for him a long time ago. I also do think Virginia would be lean for Joe Biden ultimately at the end of the day. And even a state like Minnesota is going to be lean for Joe Biden. So let's begin with New Hampshire. This state's a very anti-incumbent state, and they favor the challenger. And this time around, Donald Trump happens to be the challenger candidate, which I think that alone can go in favor of the former president. But I think Biden's probably going to win New Hampshire, just how he did in 2020 and Hillary Clinton did in 2016, who you can argue that's a worse candidate. And I honestly think 2016 was the best case scenario for Donald Trump, and he still fell short in this state by about a percentage point. Obviously, he almost won this, but still, I just think New Hampshire will support Biden this time around by probably 1 to 2 percentage points, around the same margin Hillary Clinton got it by, but maybe a little bit more than that. And then as for the state of Virginia, I think this state can get scary close. The margins would narrow up, especially from 2020. He won it by like 10 percentage points for Biden. I think it would probably be decided within, 3 to 4 percentage points this time around. So it'll be closer by probably around 6 to 7%. That's, way more closer than where it was in 2020. And considering that Donald Trump got endorsed by the governor of this state, Glenn Youngkin, who's very popular, 56% of approval rating for him, I think that alone can help Trump with the endorsement and the backing of the governor here. But that endorsement alone might not be enough to carry Trump over the finish line ultimately at the end of the day. I still think Virginia is a very blue state, even though basically every single county back in 2022 on the governorship between Youngkin and Terry McAuliffe shifted towards the right besides one county. Still, I think this state is just a little bit more bluer. Donald Trump is putting heavy focus in the state of Virginia. He thinks he can flip it, and he's dumping a lot of money, a lot of ad spending in the state of Virginia, and he's having a lot of rallies here, and I just think that ultimately that's not going to happen. Biden's going to win it. And as for the state of Minnesota, I really do think this state's going to get really close this time around, considering that Biden does not have the BLM momentum that he had just 4 years ago. It really pushed the Minneapolis suburbs to the left, and that's what really benefited Biden. He won it by 7.3 percentage points to be exact. So this time around, if we forget forget the polls and we put them aside, I think Biden's going to win Minnesota by probably a couple points, like 2 percentage points, somewhere in between there, around there actually. And there's a bunch of other factors besides BLM that really helped Biden back in 2020 that we will not be seeing this time around. For example, we're not seeing major celebrity endorsements for Biden. A lot of them actually regret endorsing him, some won't, and some actually endorse Donald Trump. So that's not going to be a factor for Biden this time around. And also, we don't have COVID. Trump was facing that outlash and a lot of baggage happening. So that really went against Donald Trump and it helped Joe Biden, but we're not having that this time around. Also, we have more third-party candidates in 2024 than in 2020, which limited Trump and it helped him in 2016. And speaking of third-party candidates, RFK, who's an independent, I think can actually win some stuff in this election. For example, I think he might be able to win Maine's at-large. Keep in mind that Biden only won it by 9 percentage points, and Hillary Clinton won Maine's at-large by 3%. So I think it can get very close. And Maine tends to favor independent candidates, and they have an independent senator, obviously, Angus King. So considering that third-party candidates and independents do very well in the state of Maine, I think RFK can pull off one of the districts. It's probably going to be most likely Maine's at-large. And maybe even in Nebraska, RFK can win its second congressional district. Keep in mind that this is expected to go to Biden, but considering that Nebraska overall is a very red state, I think considering that we just watched that debate and Biden did absolutely atrocious and people want him to be replaced on his own party, I think maybe RFK can now be, looked at for consideration of winning Nebraska's second congressional district. But in my opinion, this is the most RFK would probably get in this election. Some would argue that I'm being too nice to RFK actually. And we have 2 more Rust Belt states to cover before I end off this video. And now moving on to the tilt states, I think both Michigan and Pennsylvania, Biden's own home state, will be tilt for the former President Donald Trump in this year's election cycle. So starting off with Michigan, despite Biden getting endorsed here by the Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who is very popular, she had an amazing victory performance back in 2022. She won by double digits. So that may be able to carry Biden to a potential victory, but is it? That's the question. I'm not quite sure. And the reason why I have Trump winning Michigan 2024 is because he received less votes as an incumbent than Donald Trump did in the primaries in the state, guys. Trump received more votes than Biden on top of the 100,000 people that already voted uncommitted, in the Democratic primaries, which is not going to help Joe Biden at all. And I think if Trump is able to make gains in Detroit, the suburbs here are very important when it comes to African American voters. I think Trump would win the state ultimately at the end of the day. Now, forgetting the polls, I think Biden still has a chance in Michigan, considering that it was indeed, in fact, the bluest Rust Belt state of them all in 2020. So that alone, I think Biden can still win the state. But however, considering what we saw in the primaries in this state, it goes to show you that Biden does not have the enthusiasm in this state as he once did back in 2020. But on the other hand, as for Pennsylvania, I still think Biden does have a somewhat chance in this state, but he's pretty much cooked after what we saw on the debate. And if the election was held especially in July, Biden is definitely not favored. His current approval rating is actually at 37%, one of the lowest he's ever had. And he's never been this bad. So I do think if Trump's able to flip Erie County, northwestern Pennsylvania, he might win this state. And if he's able to run up the numbers in Central County, it's a very close one. Biden only won it by like 4 to 5 points back in 2020. I think Trump would win the state if he makes significant gains. And Biden does not hold up to his numbers in some of these stronghold Democratic counties like Philadelphia, other Pittsburgh suburbs. Those are very important. Biden's probably not going to win this state. And considering that this election, in my opinion, ultimately will come down to the suburbs, and I think the only way Biden wins this election is if the woman vote really carries him to a possible victory. Issues like abortion or reproductive rights, if that really drives voters to the polls, I think that could potentially save Biden and he will win re-election. But I just don't think that's going to happen, considering that there's way more important issues. This is not a midterm. This is a general election. And I think inflation matters more. The border crisis matter more. The economy matters more than something like abortion. I'm just going to be honest. So I do think Trump will flip Northampton County that only went to Biden by like 0.7%. So that county, Northampton, is more than likely going to flip for Trump, and I think that's going to set him for a very possible, realistic victory in the state of Pennsylvania. Biden only won the state by like 81,000 votes. That's what Trump needs to flip. I think he might be able to do it at the end of the day. So this is my finalized map if the election was held today. My updated one, 312 electoral votes for Donald Trump to Joe Biden's 223, which would send him off to retirement where he belongs. And this is my post-debate map. And obviously, RFK would get 3 electoral votes. This is honestly a hot take. I don't think anyone thinks RFK would get electoral votes. Let me know if you agree with that in the comment section down below. Do you think he would get Maine's at-large or Nebraska second? Because I think he very well can. So I do think Kennedy will get those 2 districts at the end of the day. So there you guys go. One last final reminder before I end off this video is to subscribe, as we are approaching 3,000. Click the bell so you don't miss out on my content. Give this video a thumbs up. Press the like button. Also, you have memberships if you are interested. You can find a link to that in the description section. That's pretty much it. Thank you everyone for watching.